Imagine you're at a restaurant. You see a stranger eating delicious-looking French fries. You go up to that stranger and say, "Excuse me, do you mind if I have one of your fries?" Now imagine the same scenario, except you go up to the person and say, "Excuse me, do you mind if I have one of those fries? Because I want one of those fries." Do you think there would be a difference in the response? Well, the chances are, probably yes. You're much more likely to get a fry in the second scenario by given a reason, even if the reason is completely bogus and nonsensical. In 1978, researcher Ellen Langer decided to conduct a series of experiments to find out if our behavior is actually accomplished without paying attention to the informative environment around us. This is also known as mindless behavior, or behavior that doesn't pay attention to all the details in the environment, but rather acts on scripts. Scripts can be defined as a highly stylized sequence of events in a well-understood situation. I think we've all experienced these scripts before. For example, if you get up at 7 in the morning, you get dressed, you get in your car getting ready to go to work, and then you realize it's a Sunday. There you are acting on a script. So the question is, do people engage in mindless behavior? And if so, what are the conditions? In one of our most famous experiments, they had 120 subjects and 2 different cohorts. The cohorts are actors who are actually working with the researchers. They were in a university setting, a university environment, where there was a photocopying machine. As one of the subjects went up to the photocopying machine to make copies, right before the subject was about to put the money in to make the copies, one of the cohorts came up and asked one of 3 questions. Now the question was going to have to do with cutting in front of them and making copies. The number of copies was either 5 or 20 copies, depending on the number of copies that the subject was going to make. This differentiated the 2 different research conditions. First, if the subject actually had just a few copies, and then the cohort was going to make many different copies, that would be considered a large request. However, if the subject was making a lot of copies, and the cohort just wanted to make a few copies, like 5 copies, then that would be considered a small request. In one condition was the request only. The cohort asked, "Excuse me, I have 5 or 20 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?" Now the second condition is what they called placebic information, basically bogus information. This was the same question as the first question, except this time they added something at the end. They said, "Excuse me, I have 5 or 20 pages. May I make Xerox copies? Because I need to make copies." Now if you caught it there was no real information added. It was simply saying something that the person already knew, just giving a bogus reason. Now in the third condition, they called this real information. Basically it was the same question as the first question, but with something added at the end, some real information. They said, "Excuse me, I have 5 or 20 pages. Can I make some copies using the Xerox machine because I am in a rush?" Now let's take a moment to recap what's going on here. Picture a university setting with a photocopying machine and a subject going to make copies. Now the cohort comes up, stops the person about to make copies, and asks them if they can make copies instead. Now we have 2 different variables going on here. We have the request being made, and then we have the number of copies, whether it's in the small request or the large request condition. After 120 subjects, this is what the researchers found. In the large request condition, it really didn't make any difference whether the person made the request only or whether the person added some placebic information at the end or the bogus information because I need to make copies. It didn't matter. However, in the small request condition, it did matter. The difference was significant. 60% versus 93%. 60% of the people said, yes, you could cut in front of me and make copies when there was no reason given whatsoever. However, 93% of the people said you could make copies when the reason was because I need to make copies. So what seems to be going on here is when the request is large enough, the mindlessness is replaced by thoughtful behavior. That is, if somebody had about 20 copies and somebody just wanted to jump in with a few copies, you don't even think twice about it, you just say sure, whatever. However, if you just have like 1 or 2 copies and somebody else had to make 20 copies and they asked you just to jump in because they need to make copies, then you stop to think about it and you don't automatically respond. You don't mindlessly respond. What we can take away from this is that sometimes it's better to give any kind of reason whatsoever, even if that reason really doesn't quite make sense. You're more likely to get what you want.